Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Pride Perspectives, a conversation with the community. And tonight we have a great discussion about what's to come in the month of December. As we are all gearing towards November 20. I know for a lot of faculty and families, November 20 was a pillar date on the calendar for boys to go home and for everyone to take a well-needed rest. So we are all looking forward to that and to this new opportunity for us in December. So tonight we're going to be talking about the Practicum for Civic Leadership, the winter projects, and this winter session that has come upon us. We have a great panel tonight and I'm just going to go from my computer screen, but Scott Harf, co-director of college counseling, Chris Gilman, class of 05 and senior form advisor, headmaster Bill Taylor, Roberta Liedl, director of our Center for Learning and Achievement, and Kent Burnham, who is our art department chair. And I'm JP Burlington, class of 1995 and director of admission. And we're excited again to have you all here and learn about this new but old opportunity for all of our boys in what's been a different year for us. And so before we move on, I just want to remind everybody in this webinar that we do have the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So as we progress through the evening and you have any questions, do not hesitate to put a question into that, and we'll get to it as time allows. We will also obviously be answering the questions that came through our registration, and those questions will be answered throughout the evening as well. And so as we mention every time we have a Pride Perspective, this will run probably just about 60 to 75 minutes, just so we're not taking too much of your Wednesday evening, but hopefully we'll answer all of your questions and explain this wonderful initiative that we have coming up. So Mr. Taylor, I'm confused by two things. One, I'm confused about the many different terms we have, the practicum, the winter projects, the global collaborative challenge, and so forth. But I'm also confused about this stuff growing on your face. I mean, I have it all the time, but this is something new for you. What's going on?
Well, thank you, Mr. Burlington, and good evening, everybody. Happy to spend some time with you this evening. I am supporting the National Honor Society's fundraising drive for No Shave November, with all the proceeds going toward men's health awareness, specifically fighting prostate cancer and other cancers affecting men during this month of November, sometimes referred to as Movember. So that's why I'm looking a little disheveled and maybe a little bit more unkempt than perhaps normal. But as to your other point of confusion, point well taken, Mr. Burlington. We teachers tend to get sometimes caught up in edu-speak or educational jargon and all that. So we've got these catchy names for doing different things. So I can appreciate how they can be seem confusing and somewhat perhaps vague. So let me just take a moment and try to provide some larger context. When we talk about the practicum, we're referring to the Practicum for Civic Leadership. It is a graduation requirement at Trinity Pawling. It has been for the last 5 years. And the practicum consists of 3 different components. And 2 of those components are going to be active in this winter session here in the month of December. The first component of the practicum is the interdisciplinary winter projects. And that is designed for middle schoolers, for grades 9 and 10, and for for seniors who are not pursuing a senior independent project with distinction. The second component of the practicum is the Global Collaborative Challenge. And that is designed for members of the junior class, plus new seniors and postgraduates. And then the third component is the Senior Independent Project, which does have an offshoot for those students who wish to pursue a project grade with distinction. Requires much more work. It requires extensive more check-ins with advisors, and then a much more thorough communication summary at the end. And so those three components make up the practicum. And the purpose for the practicum is to create a structured framework to specifically address skills that increasingly are more and more valuable towards students, college students, high school students, and people in the workforce in the 21st century. Specifically, an emphasis on critical thinking, collaboration, creativity, communication, citizenship. And a piece that we weave through all of this here at Trinity Pawling is character and character education. So that is the overall emphasis of the practicum. When we talk now about the Wintersession, that's a new term that we've coined to really capture this 2.5-week period between Thanksgiving and Christmas that we are going to specifically geared toward providing guided instruction in the interdisciplinary projects and the global collaborative challenge.
And Bill, thank you for that. And I guess the question would be also, and you brought up a lot of it in what you just said, but we've always done 2.5 weeks of classroom work, and as you continue to think about this, and as we've all thought about this, are the projects busy work, or is there something more? What's the motivation?
Great question, JP. And I love that the notion of busy work, because when the term projects is thrown around, I think I'll speak for myself, but I think I capture what others may feel. I think back into my elementary school days and doing projects and all of that. That's very different than project-based learning. But when you think about how creative elementary schools are, lower schools are, in capturing the interest of students in work like projects, we see the same thing here. We see students in developmentally appropriate ways that are consistent with their cognitive development, being attracted to this type of exercise to demonstrate their learning and to exercise their cognitive skills in ways that are active, that are creative, that are collaborative, and that they're outside the scope of the classroom. And we see that particularly here at a boys' school. You see the same thing in co-ed schools. And girls are attracted to this same type of learning experience as are boys. But boys being very active in their approach to learning, this is a wonderful outlet where they can be more active. Now, yes, we have always reserved this 2.5-week period for classroom instruction, but in the last 5 years, we've also worked to use this 2.5-week period for project-based learning in addition to classroom instruction. We've done that on Saturdays. We've done that by adjusting and tweaking the schedule for the classroom content during the 2.5-week period. We've done it by reducing often homework in the classroom part of this so they could work on their projects. But my colleagues who are classroom teachers will attest to this. Whenever you do classroom instruction for a 2.5-week period, and then you have 2.5 weeks off, you always have to come back in January and sort of rebuild what you establish in that 2.5 week period. And so, there's always sort of a degree of redundancy. So when we were looking at the schedule in the summertime or late spring of what this year was going to look like, it seemed to us, those of us who are putting this schedule together, that this was a prime opportunity to dig deeper into this project-based learning in ways that could be even more meaningful, more advantageous for students in their learning, and not create the sort of built-in inherent redundancies and going back and reteaching what was taught in the classroom aspect of this in 2.5 weeks, in this 2.5 week period. When you then throw on the fact that we would be remote teaching this classroom content, it seemed like a no-brainer. The next challenge for us then was to really build a robust framework for these projects so that they would take on even a larger dimension in terms of what they were going to cover. And so the projects now are much more robust. They're much more comprehensive in sort of the skills and the sequencing of skills and how they'll be developed than they were before. They have to be, because we're saying to the faculty, we're saying to the students that this project is really going to represent 50 to 60 hours worth of work. And so for us to say to faculty first, okay, here, we're going to ask you to do a project that you're going to compel and captivate the students' attention, hopefully for 50 to 60 hours over a 2.5 week period. We need to make sure that we're giving you all the guidelines, the structures to make that possible.
Well, and I think, that's something we definitely, even when we weren't in this 2.5 week period, this is something we talked to consultants and feeder schools about just the value of what this is. So I wanted to ask a little bit, and maybe Scott can chime in on this, but the value of these projects and of the GCC, not only within our school, but, with the outside.
Can I just jump in before Scott answers that, and just ask, perhaps, if Roberta, if you could, being the expert on learning and cognition, if you could talk a little bit about how we really created a larger framework for these projects in a way that will assist the faculty, but also really ensure that the students are moving sequentially through these skills.
Absolutely. Well, I think this year we took a very intentional approach to the process, looking at the process. And we started with looking at the skill set. And we know that the value added in the development of skills, especially as students go from year to year through these projects, just drives home the learning, the cognition. And so we took a little different approach. We looked at researching opportunities. We looked at ways that they could synthesize information, ways that we could evaluate their growth. So we were looking at a very goal-oriented approach to this whole process. And then we also looked at, we're meeting kids where they are in this process. And by collaborating with our team, our faculty team is really guiding this. But it really is student driven in this way, is we want them to rise to the occasion and gather information and build on these skills like communication and creativity and self-awareness. So we utilize these essential questions that teachers will be utilizing all the way through to evaluate. Are we achieving some of our skill sets? Do we have to make a shift in the way are we obtaining our goals? Are we gathering information? Are we making progress? And so we have a lot of checks and balances in there so that we know that every student that's participating in these projects is making progress and learning something and being able to apply these in a practical way and getting excited. I have to tell you, the sign-up process was amazing because I literally think I only had to chase down maybe 2 students, and they were thinking they were doing something else. And most kids really got what they wanted. So kudos to the faculty and the ideas they came up and the structure, and they really looked at those skill building opportunities and they jotted down how that was going to be built into the program. So we're using Microsoft Teams and building on that. So it's going to be extremely collaborative. I'm really excited though.
I have to throw out an anecdote watching some of the students and the parents probably, I'm sure you may not know this, some of you might, but we had communicated what the projects were in advance. We created a whole, what we call the Project Slam, where every project leader for the winter projects had 30 seconds to sort of sell their project. And there was a visual, and the faculty were really good at keeping it concise. But then we told the students that the sign up process was not going to go live until 7 o'clock last Monday. And I can't tell you how many students were saying we were waiting by the computer, waiting for the link to come through, because we wanted to make sure that we signed up for we got the project that we signed up for.
Well, they did an amazing job, and the faculty did an amazing job at talking to them. So, we're off to a really good start. All the, teachers have already kind of created their teams. They're getting ready for their first meeting on Friday. So I think we're off to an amazing start.
And, Scott, as you talk about the value of this from the college perspective, or the college guidance perspective, I know we've just described a lot about the winter projects. Maybe you could throw in a little bit about, sort of how the Global Collaborative Challenge was laid out for the students, and a little bit briefly what the Global Collaborative Challenge is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the Global Collaborative Challenge is, I'm never ashamed to admit it, it's like my favorite part of Trinity Pawling. So the Global Collaborative Challenge, Bill mentioned it earlier, is what all of our juniors, our new seniors, and our postgraduates do. So again, it's a graduation requirement. It's a very, at the surface level, it's a very simple project where the group of, we have about 80 students who go through it every year. They're broken up into normally around 16 teams, randomly assigned. So you'll be with 5 or 6 students that it may be your best friend. It may be someone you may not have met ever. And then last week, the students got their teams. And then I have a team of 8 faculty that I work with, and the faculty come up with these incredibly deep and global, some of them are on a global scale, some of them are more on a national scale, but these questions that I always like to say that are the smartest people in the world can't figure out. And then we ask a bunch of 16, 17-year-old kids to spend now 13 days figuring out. At the end of the project, the students are tasked with giving a 12-minute presentation and taking a stance on their issue. And then there's a team of faculty that will watch that presentation, and then the students have to defend their stance, basically. Throughout those 2.5 weeks, every team will also give 2 rough draft presentations. So the amount of growth, one of my favorite parts of the Global Collaborative Challenge is the growth that you see just from presentation number 1, where sometimes it's a 12-minute presentation, but it might be a 4-minute presentation, then a really awkward silence. And talk about like falling down, skinning your knees, and having to pick yourself back up. Then the second presentation, it gets a little bit better. We might get to 8 minutes, and then almost every presentation, the final version is, it could be at a college level university research class. It could be a professional presentation out there in the workplace. And that growth that we get to see every year is, like I said at the beginning, is my favorite part of working at Trinity Pawling. Bill, I do want to touch base quickly on going back to what you asked about the value of it. You talked at the beginning that it's really preparing kids for college, but it's also preparing kids for beyond college. So we're in a world now where I see this 2.5 weeks of virtual learning. If we're doing these projects and there's the communication, the collaboration, and the research and the presentation skills that Roberta mentioned earlier, we're really doing what a lot of people are doing in the real world now, and then what students are doing in college now. So we're just mirroring what they're going to be doing 2, 3, 4 years and then beyond. And And then specifically in terms of how we're leveraging it for college, working with the 45 or so seniors that I work with every year, I would say 30 of them, so well over half of them are going to mention a global collaborative challenge or a winter project in one of their college essays. And then almost every single one of them are going to mention their senior independent project in their college essay or somewhere in their college application. So it becomes this point of information where I've talked about this on these webinars before, where more and more schools are going away from test option or going away from requiring SATs and ACTs, so going to that test optional route. Our practicum gives us a point of information for, here's what this student's like outside of your regular biology classroom or English classroom or history classroom. So for like not only running the Global Collaborative Challenge and getting to see that growth, but then also a year later watching it actually help kids get into college. I get speechless with it sometimes. I love it so much.
Bill,
Yeah.
there we go.
Maybe we could get a sort of a taste of some of these projects. I know Chris Gilman, you've got an interesting project. Why don't you sort of explain what that's all about and what the objectives are?
Sure. I do want to touch base though. I think the students had to pick a project on Monday night at 7:00, and I was on dinner duty on Monday night. And usually you have to be out of the dining hall by 7, and we could not get the kids out of the dining hall because they were all on their phone waiting to pick their project. So go back to that point. But thanks, Bill. So I teamed up this year with Cody Doyle, who works in the math department, and our project is called Moneyball. And project is based off of the movie and the book Moneyball. For those of you that are familiar with it, it's based on the Oakland A's manager, Billy Beane, who, the Oakland A's were behind the rest of the MLB in terms of money and being able to sign players and paying them a lot of money. So, he hired this sports analysis to come in and look at analytics of baseball in particular, in this incident, but of ways to what statistics really jump out to make a team very successful, and instead of just paying them all the money. So we thought it'd be a great idea to kind of create this project where, students have the ability to explore a particular sport or a topic of their choosing, where they learn how to use data and how to go through statistics and kind of arrive at a conclusion. So, some of the ideas that were thrown around just in kind of talking with the kids that have signed up, even though we haven't had a meeting, it's exciting to see that they're excited about it and already thinking about their topics. But one of them was, what's the probability of a major sports city winning 3 out of 4, championships in a year, or, what's the value of, if a team scores a shorthanded goal in hockey was one of the things that came up. So it's really exciting. I'm very excited to work with this group of guys because they seem eager to get going. I love the topic. I think it's going to be really exciting. So I can't wait to get going.
And Chris, how many kids are in your particular project?
So I have 12, I think 11.
Yep.
I
You have 10. So we capped
10,
the
12.
I gained, sorry, I thought I gained a few more.
you gained, I think you're at 10. We capped them off to a certain size because we wanted to make sure the intensity of the connection and the collaboration was there. So, and I have to say that Chris's Moneyball was number 1, signed up like within the first probably 15 minutes. That was it. And people were knocking on my door trying to see if they could petition to get back on it. So we might have added 1 or 2, but
That's because he had dining room duty and he kept everyone there and made them vote for it.
he was probably signing them up.
I was trying to figure out what they're all doing, and then I realized they're all yelling at me. They're signing up for their project. I can't out. So they're all very excited to get going. So it's going to be an exciting time.
And
Ken, you've got a really interesting one. being the history teacher that I am, I was captivated to read about yours.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for having me here. Yeah, I'm excited about it. It is a rebroadcast of Orson Welles' 1938 drama, The War of the Worlds, a radio drama, which is based on the Welles novel. And then Orson Welles adapted that for the 1938 with the Mercury Theater. And there was a lot of, the fun part about this is that there's, it was all told that it was going to be, it's fiction. It's a radio drama and everything, but a lot of people weren't listening to that part. So when it came on the news that the Martians were invading us and that Mars had exploded, and that New Jersey was under attack, a lot of people really believed it. People were supposedly running out into the streets, and some people said that they even were jumping out of windows. Who knows what the real story is, but it's kind of, as I mentioned, it's kind of the birth of fake news in a way. So I think it's really interesting how the whole topic of this, I'm partnering with Chris Kelsey, who is our instrumental music teacher. So he's going to do some live music with some students on this project, as well as Slade Mead, who is in the history department with you, Bill, and all different things, and also working with Scott as co-director of college counseling. So Slade is a huge fan of this. So he's going to be our history component of this as like a dramaturge, and making sure that we understand. He also, I think, knows the whole script. Mr. Kelsey, Chris Kelsey, I believe, knows the whole thing. He said he grew up with it, listening to it. So I'm in pretty good company. So it should be really fun. I think it's just a really great way for them to explore something new and different. And the other thing that I'm excited about is that you don't have to learn lines. So the script's going to be right on your screen, and we're going to work an hour and a half, 2 hours a day throughout this whole process. And I think it will really enable some students that have an interest in acting and maybe doing some voice work or whatever that might be, to really kind of step into something without being seen. So I think the onus of being self-conscious and being up on stage will be lifted or relieved, because we'll be turning off the screens. We'll be just doing it through Zoom and microphones. And I think there'll be a really neat connection to it, and in a different way. I think the students will really embrace it in a different way and not feel self-conscious. So I'm really excited about it. I think it should be really great. When these projects rolled out, I will honestly say that I said to Amy Foster soon after, wouldn't it be great if we all had to do one of the projects ourselves? Like there's so many, like Chris mentioned with Moneyball, and then Road Trip, and then there's like food, and I mean, there's an environmental and sustainability and all of these ideas that I just was like, I want to learn that. I want to learn how to fly tie. I want to learn like motorcycle maintenance and whatever it is. It was just really, it was a really cool day. It really was. And so I think it will be an exciting time. And I've been able to do, the first year I was here, I worked on SIPs, and then last year I worked on the Global Collaborative Challenge, and this year I get to do this. So it's kind of a nice way to get a whole look at the whole perspective and see the different ways of doing it. So I'm looking forward to it. It'll be great.
Thank you, Kent. And speaking of the Global Collaborative Challenge, from your experience last year, Scott, I mean, there's a really interesting way that the kids choose their projects or their topics. And once you run through that experience, and then also sort of describe how this will roll out for a group.
Yeah, absolutely. So aptly named the Global Collaborative Challenge, we every year when we assign the teams, the kids get a challenge right away. So they'll get the full roster of their team, and they've got to get together, and each team gets assigned a letter. So team A has 6 students in it. And I think I sent it out in the morning on a Friday, and then starting at 3 o'clock that afternoon, they could start sending in a team picture. So they had to get all 6 members in a picture with masks on, or they could do it virtually. And then they had to choose a team mascot, so an animal that started with the same letter as their team name. So I think I have it here. The Bears this year were the first ones. They got it in about 5 minutes after the draft opened. They chose Team B, chose the Bears, and then the alpacas and the gorillas and the kangaroos and so on and so on and so on. And then from that draft order, the Bears obviously got the first pick of the questions that the faculty leaders chose. And the faculty, we actually, last year we started to keep it so that the faculty leaders were anonymous. So you didn't know, you weren't drafting a faculty member necessarily, but you're just drafting a question that you were, that you and your team were interested in. So some of the questions that we picked, the Bears chose one of Mr. Mead's classic questions, should the Electoral College be abolished? Then some of the other questions we have this year, are social media platforms responsible for the content their users post on their platforms? That's Mr. Fritz's question with Team C. Another one from this year is very appropriate, given that we're moving into online learning, but whose responsibility is it to react to and address a global pandemic? We have another question, is nuclear energy a feasible option for meeting future energy demands? We have a question, what has the Black Lives Matter movement accomplished? And then probably one of my favorite ones that comes up every year, we have the question, how do we solve the global problem of disposing of plastic? And I do want to note that all of these questions, when we go through the grading process and the presentation process, we're, as adults, we're taking a very neutral stance, and we want to hear the team come to a consensus. So part of that exercise is not necessarily finding the quote unquote correct answer, but coming to a consensus and collaborating as a team and giving an answer with facts that back your position up. So you're never going to be caught in a position of, debating with a faculty member or another team whether you got your question right. It's just being able to it's being able to present a position and back that position up. And then I did see a question, and I'll hand it back over to you, JP, in a second, but I did see a question come through in the chat about just kind of the structure. So the structure for the Global Collaborative Challenge is going to be that for the 2 full weeks we have, Monday through Friday, the teams will meet with their faculty member for 2 45-minute sessions. They'll be recorded, so it'll be like kind of natural note taking for the kids, so they can actually go back and watch the recordings if they forgot something. The kids are required to be there, so they get 90 minutes a day. The only difference would be on Thursday or Friday of each of those weeks, each student has each team has those rough draft presentations I was going to talk about. So we'll go back to the Bears for first overall pick. They have Thursdays at 3:00 Eastern. So on December 3rd and December 10th, the Bears already know that they have their rough draft presentation. So they'll give that to me and Mr. Mead, and we'll give them some critiques on how they're doing. And then the final week, the Bears are going to present on Tuesday at 3:00 Eastern, 3:00 p.m. Eastern, again for their final presentation. And then just for the last week, Monday, you'd have the normal 2 45-minute sessions, one at the beginning of the day, one at the end of the day, with your faculty member there recorded and everything. And then the Bears, they present on Tuesday, so they get, they'll meet once, do their presentation. And then on Wednesday, even though they're done with their project, we are going to ask that those students view 2 of the teams that are presenting on Wednesday. So they'll still have the same time commitment, but it's also a really good opportunity to see, again, it's a global, there's a lot of global topics out there. So I think it's good for the kids to get to experience not only what their peers are working on, but also start to think about some of the other issues out there that their peers did work on.
Great, thanks, Scott. Roberta, could you actually talk, we've, as Scott mentioned, a couple of the GCCs that are being done, besides the ones that Kent and Chris are working on. I know Kent mentioned a couple. Can you just run through some of the other winter projects that the faculty and students are doing?
Absolutely. So there are 20 projects in all. So wonderful options. And like I said, the largest group I think is 10. So wonderful, diverse selection here. So we have Mr. Karate and Doc Mandigo are doing The Earth is the Center of the Universe. Mr. Poon and Mr. Riley doing environmental energy, past, present, and future. The Keels are doing a road trip, and we have Moneyball, we have Benign Distractions, The Art of Fly Tying, The Birds, the Bees, and Oh, the Bats, and that's an environmental piece where they're looking at building ecosystems and homes for some of these critters that are on our campus. We have some Slavery Then and Now. I have the analysis of the African American oral experience through rap. So this is only just a few. I don't know if you want me to go through all
That's
of them,
great.
but
And then was do middle school in that list, or do they have a separate list?
absolutely. So we wanted the middle school to have the same opportunity to experience the skill building set. And so what we did is we have 3 of these are options for the middle school. So we can make sure that they're working collaboratively within their class, but also experiencing some of the same skill building sets that the others are. So they have the middle school road trip, which is kind of a middle school version of Mr. Keel and Mrs. Keel's road trip. We have Palettes from Our Past, a virtual cookbook. And then the Birds and the Bees and Oh, the Bats were the 3 options. And the kids really got to pick exactly what they wanted. Mrs. Karate did a great job of helping them figure out which would entice them into the winter session.
Now, just listening to those projects and how interesting they are, those of us who, grew up in an old school learning model, even myself have to say, okay, so where's the learning in all of that? But every one of the projects had to be submitted, and there was a committee that looked at all the learning criteria for each project, making sure that all the objectives of synthesis of information, critical thinking, research, communication, all those were being not just addressed, but addressed in a way that each built upon the other. And so that was all part of the vetting and approval process.
Absolutely. And we also provided them with a rubric to look at each pieces so that when they are going through this, they have something that they can reference to make sure to see where their growth is where their baseline is and see where growth is happening. So no, I'm really excited. There's a lot of great opportunities here for kids for these 2.5 weeks.
So Bill, I know Scott kind of mentioned a little bit of the organization for the GCC. Could you talk a little bit about, and Roberta, how it's being organized? And, Scott mentioned 45 minutes here, 45 minutes there. Maybe talk a little bit about how the projects are going to work out.
Bill, you want me to? So the whole premise is that we're doing a minimum of 50 hours of work. Now, I will not be surprised if kids become engaged and that becomes 100 hours, because we know when we get passionate about something and we're engaged and we're understanding the process, we become invested, and the hours go by and we realize, oh, I've been doing my research, or I've been working on this project for hours. So the week one, this Friday, it's starting with this Friday, they are having their first meeting at 10 o'clock. So kids that are virtual already will be established that on Teams. And then the ones that are still on campus will be meeting with their team leaders. So there's 2 faculty. And that's making sure that everybody has the access to Teams, that they understand the parameters and the expectations, and make sure that they have access to resources if they need them. So week 1, what happens is on Sunday, November 29th, they're just going to communicate with their group, make sure, hey, everybody's got internet, everybody's okay, just checking in. And then it will start on Monday, November 30th to Friday, November 4th. There's going to be a daily 90-minute team meeting. Now, when I say that, each team is going to kind of figure out how that works best for their team. So they might break that up and take okay, we're going to have a 15-minute or a 20-minute or a 30-minute snack break. Everybody come back, or go think about that and come back. But it's 90 minutes of basically online instruction, however that's broken down. And that will be recorded, and so that they can also reflect and utilize that as a tool. And then the students are expected to do 2 hours of independent work, whether that's research online, whether that's hands-on research, whether that's going out in the field or gathering data, interviewing, whatever they're doing. And then there's going to be a 45 minutes of a faculty office hours where they can share progress and ask questions and look at and do analysis and troubleshoot and provide some scaffold support if a kid couldn't get started for some reason, or didn't know who to interview or didn't know where to research, where they can also give peer support too. So that is week 1 that will happen. Then there will be some feedback. The team leaders will be talking to each student's advisor and giving an update. And then that advisor will be sharing that with parents to make sure that they're on track, and so that we make sure that everybody is engaged, and we this is a collaborative approach. So we need the parents at least giving us feedback if they're seeing something on our end that we're not aware of. And then the second week, it follows the same cycle where Saturday and Sunday are opportunities for independent work for them. Monday through Friday, December 11th, they're doing that 90-minute, 2 hours of independent work and 45 minutes of office hours. And then on the third week, on that Monday, they will practice their presentation or whatever their project is. They will figure out how to present what they learned, or the product that they built, or the research that they've developed, or a PowerPoint. And we've grouped them up, the teams, with a partner group. And so on Tuesday, Group A will be presenting with Group B, and then on Wednesday, Group B will be presenting with Group A, and they'll be recording that, and we'll have a place, an opportunity for people to see those also, to see how that is. So they get to see that the growth. The beauty of this is that we are really kind of collecting information on how they are building their skill set. So we have really clear measures, and the grading will be fail if they're not engaged at all. Low pass, pass, and high pass. So utilizing the rubrics that are developed, we can really hone in on what they need to do. So we should be able to coach them through that. But it's definitely their opportunity to build skills.
And Bill, Roberta mentioned it, but a question did come in. How much are parents? Is mom, dad, grandma standing over the shoulder, or helping out in different ways? What advice would you give to the parents for this?
We certainly don't want the parents engaged in doing the project or helping with the project. I think during this period of remote, and perhaps it doesn't need to be said, but I mean, we're remote, so we can really ensure the health and well-being of everybody, and to minimize the travel back and forth from campus. So during this remote period, I think where the parents can be most helpful is letting their son's advisor know if they're not engaging or using that time. We're gonna see that, we're gonna see it, but we may not see it as quickly as you're gonna see it. And if you're noticing that, reach out to your son's advisor, anybody at the school. We'll circle back and rally the troops to make sure that engagement is enhanced. But as Roberta just outlined, we built in this regular checkup time, the daily meeting, so the teachers who are leading the projects are going to be able to see if there's really nothing going on. Then we're going to be communicating with you just like we would be communicating if we were on campus.
And we mentioned that the grading for both of the winter project and the GCC. Scott, can you just reflect quickly a little bit on the grading process for that?
Yeah, the grading for the GCC is again high pass, pass, low pass, or fail. The students actually got the rubric on Monday or Tuesday this week, so they already have that, and it's based on uh, both mostly a final presentation, but there are pieces that their body of work with their teammates, kind of on an individual level throughout the process, does get taken into account. So about 80% of the grade is a team grade, but there is opportunity there, 20%, where you can really rise above your group, or you could also, hopefully not, but there is a negative to that too, potentially. But then the one non-negotiable with the GCC is that everyone has to show up and speak at the final presentation. So you could be a rock star and not present at the final presentation, and it's not going to go well. So there is like I said, the students already have it, and it is based on the final presentation, but also takes into account the body of work of each individual student.
And Bill
Jump
and
in.
Roberta.
If I can,
Oh, Ken, go ahead.
yeah, no, yeah. I just wanted to jump in. I think the nice thing about this too is that everything is a collaborative experience. If it's the senior, if it's the independent project, they're working with a faculty member, looking at this, sharing some ideas, as well as some other students, and then the GCC, which I got to work on last year, and then this year, as well as working on a winter project, with them being that they're collaborative, that you oftentimes need somebody to lead in that group who steps up and starts to lead, and then other people, and then you can have the quiet leader too. And the nice thing is that you get to meet and you get to see everybody kind of disseminates and says, okay, I'm going to cover this, I'm going to work on this, and I'll work on this, and then you can really come back to the table and see where they're at. And you can do that as a faculty advisor too, and it's very, very clear who's putting in the work, who's not putting in the work. And then they also have to overcome some of these challenges too. How do they communicate with each other? How do they figure this out? How do they make everybody accountable? And it's not easy. It's not easy work. At first, maybe sometimes it's, they're very soft on it. And then as we get closer, and Scott, you probably can attest to that, seeing some of these 4-minute and 8-minute, 12-minute presentations, you see the difference in the person who's done the work and who hasn't. And so it's a real challenge for them. And as Scott mentioned, I think these are all things that are applied to everything after college and all of that. How do you work with a team? And so I think it's really great way to do this. This is building a team, building an ensemble, all of the words that you want to talk about. But the collaborative idea behind it is that we are responsible for the work. And if somebody drops the ball, it will show, and either somebody has to pick it up, or they'll speak right out at some point. They'll make the person step up.
And it's a really good exercise too in if someone does get sick and can't get there during a rough draft presentation, it's on their teammates to step in and step up for them. So it puts some onus on each individual to know what their teammates are talking about when their teammates are talking. It certainly is not an individual presentation, 5 individual presentations. It's a team effort.
Yeah. And Scott, I think that was one of the questions that actually just came in, and both Kent and Scott just answered it. But if you have 6 members of a team, each member is going to speak for about 2 minutes. And again, that goes back to the collaborative nature. And I think one of the GCCs that I witnessed a couple of years ago, we talk about it in admissions all the time. It's kind of the exciting part is that, if a teammate is down, you got to pick them up. Well, in this situation, a teammate was trying to Xerox copy, for the panelists, and the Xerox copy machine broke. And that's going to happen in high school, college, and the real world. And so he was late. Somebody else had to step in for him. And then the gentleman that was late had to step in for the teammate that did his part. So it was real. It was live, and real world problem solving, which I think is a huge aspect of this. So Bill or Roberta, the grading process, is it similar with the winter project?
Yeah, same, low pass, pass, high pass structures. Same focus on rubrics. A rubric will be different because the skills are slightly different, but the same idea of giving, give the faculty looking for certain key areas and then explaining those to the kids.
And one other part of, I think the projects and the, one of the questions that just came in, will the boys be recording their work sessions that they do on their own independently? Or do they just make sure when they come back to the group that they have something tangible to show?
They won't need to record. The driving factor is that they have that construct of meeting with their team leaders. So team leaders are giving them direction. They're not giving them assignments, right? This is a project. I think of it as almost like a professional project. And okay, we need some quality control. You need to be able to become self-aware. Are you struggling? You might need to have to communicate those things. So the whole point of it is giving them kind of their marching orders, giving them some guidance, them going off, collecting what they understand they need to do, and then coming back and reflecting on it and analyzing it and looking at it as a team. And some of these projects are students are building their individual piece of the project, and some are building a collaborative approach to it. So it's like making a production where you have aspects of it, and some people will step up and be more comfortable with certain aspects of it, and some might take a more passive approach in an area they're not comfortable. But it's also an opportunity to model those behaviors for them and them to get really comfortable. And that's where I love that this starts in the 8th grade and works through, because as they see that, those models, then they build those skills. So that's what we hope. So.
And Bill, one of the things that I think, we in admissions talk about and how the progression of these projects, the ultimate goal at the end, when it was a December to February, there was a much longer time period. But everybody's getting graded and things like that. But what do you feel like is the ultimate goal for someone who's doing a project like Moneyball, or doing something like building an owl home? What's the overall goal for you?
I think the goals are going to be similar, if not almost identical. The process is going to be what's different. Let me flesh that out a bit. Somebody who's got an interest in building something or woodwork is going to be drawn to the OWL project. We want that level of personal engagement, that it's tapping into something that young man says, I really have an interest in that. Or, sports statistics or acting, or, that's sparked an interest in me, that spoke to me in some way, and I want to explore that further. So that's the beginning of the outcome, is to have the boys understand that there are things out there that are going to speak to you personally. And once you find those areas that excite you, that captivate you, even a little, we'll start with a little, then let us teach you the specific skills on how to dive in and get the most out of that exploration process in ways that are actually reinforcing skills that you're learning in algebra, that you're learning in English, that you're learning in economics, that you're learning in theater, and by the way, that you're learning in hockey and you're learning in basketball and squash. But if they're speaking directly to that piece inside of them that finds something interesting, that is the beginning of following your passions. You don't know it's a passion yet, but those are the first steps in that. And so the ultimate objective is building a framework around an emerging sense of self-awareness. This is who I am. This is what interests me. And you know what? I'm learning the skills on how to get the most out of my exploration of that interest.
That's great. And so before I ask one of the kind of ending questions that we came up with, Bill, I can't imagine that everyone was parents were not supposed to take notes. Some parents might be taking notes, but a lot was given out here in the last 55 minutes. So are we following up tomorrow with a little more information for the parents?
Yeah, so I'll be sending a letter out that sort of reiterates a lot of what was said here this evening. But I will also send you examples of what we've talked about and what we've shared with the faculty. So you can have something tangible that you can look at that really is the foundation of what we've shared with you this evening.
And just in case, because I know every year we've started the practicum for civic leadership, especially with the winter projects. There are some students that, well, going back to what you just said, Bill, that maybe the 20 projects weren't quite of interest. I know there's always a couple of kids every year that decide to do something that they've said to a faculty advisor, the owl thing, the Moneyball thing, not quite me. Can I do this? So just in case a boy goes home and tells the parents that I'm doing this project and they said, well, it wasn't mentioned. Can you just, maybe mention some, not specifically what they are, but that kids have an option to do that?
Or, I mean, that's always been an opportunity. If students want to design a project, then they could seek out 2 faculty members that can help them. Roberta, do we have some of those?
We do. We have a young man who's doing global sanctuary, and he has hashed out he followed the same criteria that the faculty had to do to submit a proposal for his project, and it was looked at by the committee and cleared. And he has 2 faculty members that are kind of helping him, just making sure that he has access to all of the materials that he needs to do, and outlines and things like that. So we do. There are students that are driven to a certain topic and are willing to put in the time and willing to do those skills that, to attribute skills to something that they're just passionate about. And that's what we see here.
And, and we haven't really spoken too much about the Senior Independent Project, because we'll have some students, some of the seniors are working on finalizing their project with distinction, but this period, this winter session is really designed for the winter projects and the GCCs. But just in terms of the sequence, when I talked about, boys finding things that really captivate, that's the purpose of the Senior Independent Project. That after they've had this experience, or maybe they're just here, they're doing it for the first time, we challenge them to think about what excites them, what captivates them. And then we build a larger project, help them build a larger project that is much more independent. They're checking in actually with Scott, who's overseeing that with Slade Mead. But it's independent, but there's check-in points. But it really is designed, once they've built these skills through these exercises, they can really dig deep into something that is truly their own. So, this project that you've seen pictures of in the front quad, those were 2 boys working together because they wanted to do something that was going to broaden the community's awareness of the impact of COVID. And, planting 34,000 flags in the front lawn of the school. That's just one example, but if you go to the website, you'll see lots of different examples of the Senior Independent Project, but they're designed to work together.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting about, that project, and, Peter and Stuart, obviously 6 months ago, that was not in their mindset. They probably had something in their head that they were thinking about, that maybe they had gone through that progression of 1, 2, 3 years of being here, but something else sparked this in them to do this Senior Independent Project. And I think that's also something, the beauty of how we can be so flexible in this, I get an ever-changing world. So Bill, I think one of the things that I'm really excited about is just this 2.5 weeks, this winter session that we have really been able to adapt to. And you talked about it in the beginning, but I just think the future of this winter session to me is as an admissions person is something really exciting to be able to go out there and talk about and say that Trinity Pawling is doing something different and unique. And so as we kind of, well, it's 8 o'clock. So as you can kind of finish off tonight about the future of this and why it excites me, and I'm sure why it excites the people on this panel.
Sure. I mean, it seems like a luxury that we don't spend, that I don't allow myself to spend too much time thinking about, but the luxury is what will things be like post-COVID? Because it's a luxury because so much of our energy and focus is how do we get through each day with this pandemic? But there are times when we can think, okay, what will things be like and what have we learned from this? Well, this winter session can be so much more robust if we're here, and it will be, and we believe that this is a much more valuable learning experience for us being remote than being in our individual classes. If we didn't, we wouldn't have done this. But post-COVID in the future, there's so much potential for this 2.5 week, 3 week period to really dive in much deeper with things like that. And there are other examples less significant all around that we've learned. And not to digress, but a couple of the boys the other week were talking about the weekend, this is 2 weekends ago, being the best weekend that they'd ever had on campus. And when you asked them what they did, they were outside. They went hiking. They went fishing. They were outside. They played frisbee golf. I mean, just think about the discussions we were having a year ago about screen time and how to get kids away. So there is a post-COVID piece to this. It is coming. And the way this winter session is going to develop is going to be an exciting part of the school's future.
And I think, moving into this break and, parents taking that advice. I mean, the boys spent a lot of time outside over the last couple of months. And I think as much as you can outside of them doing their projects and being on Zoom and Teams and, continue that outside element if you can. And it's been incredibly healthy for the boys. And we've been lucky with the weather. It has cooperated incredibly for us as we've had so much weekend time outside. So as we finish off tonight, I want to remind us that we will be a quiet Pride Perspective for a little while. The next time that we come back together is December 16th, and that'll actually be hosted by Scott Harf and Slade Mead on the college process. It's geared specifically for juniors, but it will be open to the entire community, as are all of these Pride Perspectives. And as we come into January, we will begin our winter series of Pride Perspectives, one of which is Headmaster's Book Club. And Bill, I don't have it off the top of my head, but what is the book that we are? It's Matt Gladwell. I know it's a Gladwell book. It's probably on your shelf.
It is.
And I'm sure Amy Foster is about to text it to me in the next 30 seconds. So, but anyway.
Talking to strangers.
Yes, there we go. Okay. So the winter series of Pride Perspectives will be on the website soon. So please look out for those throughout the month of January. And I want to thank the panelists for being here tonight, and also thank all the attendees who were here. It was a pleasure bringing this winter session to all of you as we head off for our Thanksgiving break and a long awaited break. And so from all of us at Trinity Pawling, we wish you a wonderful holiday, Thanksgiving, time with your boys, time with family, and as always, stay safe and stay healthy, and we will see you all soon. Thank you so much.
Happy Thanksgiving.